On what's happening in Congress, of course, Alan Greenspan was no stranger to Capitol Hill, and today something might happen that hasn't taken place in a while. An actual bipartisan vote to advance a policy that might help a couple of people. It has to do with housing, and it may not unglue you from your home, it may not bring down interest rates, but lawmakers will at last have something to talk about that might help people and not be controversial here. The Senate comes in today and is expected to pass this bipartisan housing package this afternoon, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. The House would come around on this later in the week, and this is what we want to talk about with our man, Nathan Dean, of course, the senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, known to some as America's dad. I hope you had a great Father's Day. I mean, they have this day just for you, right? I mean,
oh, yeah.
This would be like your Christmas.
We went hiking around the Potomac, so it was quite good.
You went hiking around the Potomac. This guy wasn't hanging around in a tank top on the couch yesterday watching TV like I was. He took his family on a hike, and that's what America's dad does. You ever meet Alan Greenspan? You ever spend time with Greenspan?
You know, we studied him back in the University of Chicago so much. I felt like I knew him intimately, but
yeah,
no,
how about that?
I
met him at a correspondence dinner once. I'm sure he had no idea who I was. I'm not sure he even knew we were being photographed at the time, but I have a picture somewhere with him. To think of the giant of a man who would have that much impact on the markets, we may never see another Fed chair like that.
No,
right?
I don't think so. And especially like you mentioned with AI and speeches and like just the amount of coverage that the Federal Reserve gets these days versus back then. I mean, back when I was at the University of Chicago, it was like we had one speech and we had to actually go word by word and figure out exactly what it was that he actually meant. Now you have economists, you have Bloomberg Intelligence, you have Bloomberg Economics. Right. It's just a different world.
It sure is. And a different world in a lot of ways in Washington, to the point where we're celebrating the housing vote today like it's a life-changing moment. Maybe it will have an impact on this industry, which has been frozen for years. And I'm wondering your thoughts on this, because you've got to be getting phone calls. It's not like the home buyers have been cranking. What's the impact on the industry and then the market?
Yeah, I would caution expectations here from when it comes to the home builders industry. Now, we've looked at this bill intimately ever since, House, Senate, House. Yeah. And we're calling it a wash. I mean, it really does cut regulatory red tape. And look, it's going to do things like manufactured housing is going to become easier. So there are certain elements of housing that will become easier. But ultimately, it's not going to really change the housing outlook. One of our producers today even said, am I going to be able to buy a house off of this? It's not really going to change things all that much. But the most important thing here is that President Trump has said earlier this year that he wanted to ban corporations from being able to buy single-family homes. Yes. That's in here. So any institutional investor can't buy more than 350 homes. But there are so many exemptions to this that even those single-family REITs like Invitation Homes and AMH, they're not going to be harmed by this.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they have to? So this would be purchasing new homes. They don't have to sell existing inventory. Why is that?
Yeah, so this really goes if you're purchasing homes tied to rentals, if you're purchasing homes to other exemptions. And one of the things that's also not included in here, which really scared the industry a lot, was this provision that would require you to divest purchases after 7 years. So if you're building a build-to-rent community, and this was in the original House, the original Senate bill, if you purchased a build-to-rent community or built one, you would have to divest it over 7 years. That doesn't make a build-to-rent community any viable whatsoever. So, that was one of the things that we were tracking. And then the last thing is that private equity had some headline risk. So when this bill first came out, Blackstone dropped about 4% based off of the news. Blackstone's assets under management tied to single-family homes is 0.04%. So when the investors figured that out, the stock came back. But there was that 1% delta that people were concerned that President Trump was going to go after PE. This bill doesn't do that.
Fascinating. You're bringing us back to the beginning of this whole saga. Even BlackRock was selling off because people didn't know the difference between the two, as I remember here. So build to rent, to be clear, is not part of this, or simply needs to be sunset in a way that makes it not that much of a game changer.
The provision that would require you to dispose of your assets after 7 years is not included in it. Wow. And that was the biggest concern from the investment point of view.
That's where the teeth would have been.
That's where the teeth would have been. So ultimately, this bill, look, the bill is a positive. It cuts a lot of regulatory red tape. Even the crypto sector, there's a central bank digital currency ban that was inserted into this. And so it's a temporary ban. So this bill definitely is positive, net positive for the home building aspect for America.
Yeah, sure.
It just isn't going to change dramatically how things are operating.
So, but I guarantee you, lawmakers from both parties will come on this program and across this network, Democrats and Republicans, and when they look for something good to say, they will all bring this up, especially if we do FISA and all the stuff I'm going to ask you about, the DNI, all the controversy on, they're going to say, but we did pass that housing bill. And that's kind of the point here, right? So they can carry something on the campaign trail to crow about.
Yeah, I mean, like, just as you were introducing the program, the little thing below my chest said affordability. Yeah. And so that's where this message is, because it is an affordability bill that's addressed at cutting costs. An affordability
bill. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. So members of both parties, and look, this is highly bipartisan. This is kind of weird because you had a highly bipartisan vote in the House go up against a highly bipartisan vote in the Senate, and they couldn't get it together until they actually had to negotiate more. So, there are 90% of the lawmakers on Capitol Hill are going to vote in favor of this. But ultimately, when it comes to affordability, and think of the midterm elections, you have food, you have inflation, you have the high prices of homes. And when it comes to home building in particular, the biggest challenge for the policymakers is this, is that it's two things. One, most housing policy in the United States is actually driven by the states. It's driven by localities, the states. It's not driven by the feds. And secondly, if I'm a homeowner, and I like the value of my home being high, but if I'm trying to buy a home, I don't want the value of the home to be high.
Right.
So you have two constituencies that you're trying to actually make happy, and it's detrimental to each other.
Even the president's been saying that, that's just the nest egg for a lot of families. I don't want to knock that over in an effort to loosen up the housing market. So we'll call this the easy part today. Again, the House gets to it later in the week, but we've got FISA now expired for, a couple of weeks? Already over Bill Pulte, who is now the DNI officially. How are they going to get out of this morass?
I think it's going to have to go through the 4th of July. And I think when they come back through the 4th of July, that's when they'll tackle this. Because, look, the Senate moved super fast to try and get Bill Pulte.
They had it all lined up.
They had it all lined up. I mean, the Senate doesn't move fast until it has to. And then at the last second, President Trump said, I'm going to ask Jay Clayton not to show up to the hearing. Yeah. And now we're in this stalemate. So I think what's happening here is President Trump wants to give Acting Director Pulte a little bit of time to look at the DNI and maybe suggest some changes. The Democrats are warning, don't do the mass firings that people have been reporting about. But I think when it comes to the 4th of July, I think the lawmakers are going to come back. Maybe they'll strike a deal. President Trump's meeting with the Senate GOP leadership this week.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
So, I don't know what's going to happen here, but President Trump's insistence on trying to get the FISA bill tied to the Save America Act is just making things even more difficult for Senate Majority Leader John Thune.
And that's never going to change, right? John Thune's never going to get the votes.
No, the votes aren't there. And so, this idea of a filibuster going away or a talking filibuster, it's not going to happen. Because at the end of the day, let's say the Republicans are in favor of doing away with the filibuster. Why would you do away with the filibuster 3 months before the midterm elections when it looks like the House is going to go to the Democrats?
Pretty great question. I don't know that he would have an answer to that. He seems to think it's inevitable, and Democrats will do it as soon as they get in the door anyway. Did you take the kids by the reflecting pool?
No, because no.
Didn't want to get arrested?
No, we're just, we'll keep them closer to the Potomac right now.
Have you seen what they're doing at the mall? They've got the Ferris wheel up down there. Your kids know about this?
Yep.
You're going to bring them down to the State Fair, whatever they call it?
Anytime there's a crowd in Washington, D.C.,
I stay away from it.
I stay
You're
back
not
in
going
Virginia.
to this thing. Well, we're going down. We have to bring some cameras down there. I want to ride that Ferris wheel with Kaylee Lyons. That is one of my goals this week. I feel like you should be on that same Ferris wheel.
I'll come.
You would come down for that?
I'll come for that.
So you got the Ferris wheel going up. The reflecting pool is its own destination now. People are going there just to see how green the water is or what's floating in it. You've got a presidential speech, right? They've got the big MAGA rally. Is that Wednesday night, I believe?
Wednesday night.
They're going to have flyovers down there. What the heck else do you need to get down to the mall, Nathan D.?
Well, I mean, the 4th of July fireworks, President Trump's talking about having a rally there as well. And look, I think this is what President Trump is doing ahead of the elections here because, look, he's been leaving the White House a little bit more. He's been going to the Madison Square Garden for the Knicks game. He had the UFC fight. He has the rally on June 24th, the potentially speech on the July 4th. And so President Trump is getting back into domestic politics because that's where he wants to go. I mean, it's going to be
as if he's on the ballot in November.
As if he's on the ballot in November. And the challenge is, and we've mentioned this before on other programs, is that it's very difficult for presidents to remain on the ballot when they're not on the ballot.
How true.
And so he's going to try again.
Just wait till that convention in September. I don't know. The claw is still there. I feel like he could use that for something on the mall. Maybe we'll get Nathan on the Ferris wheel this week. If that happens, I'll let you know. We'll put the video up. Catch his podcast on our podcast feed for Balance of Power, and we'll assemble our panel next. Nathan Dean, thank you. This is Bloomberg.